Hi, I'm Debbie Zimmerman. I'm the Executive Director of Women Make Movies. For those of you who don't know, Women Make Movies is a nonprofit organization based in New York that's celebrating its 40th anniversary of working with women filmmakers, both through distributing their films as well as through a production assistance program where we help filmmakers try to get their films made. We've got 3 films in the festival here. I hope you saw some of them. One is actually produced by Pat Fisk, who's all the way on the left, Scarlet Road. Another one is Going Up the Stairs. And the third one is the Academy Award winner for Best Short Documentary this year, Saving Face. We're very proud of them. But today, we're here to talk about producing. When Heather found out that it was our 40th anniversary and that we were doing 40 events around the world, to celebrate our anniversary, she said, you have to do something in Sheffield. And I said, of course. And so she actually gave me absolute carte blanche to come up with whatever panel I wanted to come up with. And of course, she said, you know, you could do something about women and how hard it is still for women. I'm like, no, I don't want to whine. I'm really tired of whining. What I really want to do is start thinking about strategies to help the fact that we still are far behind our male colleagues in terms of our films getting into festivals, our films being reviewed, our films getting wide distribution, and getting money to make our films. We did a very informal study over the last 10 years, and what we found was that men making films about men got the most amount of money, and women making films about women got the least amount of money. In addition, very interestingly, women making films about men got more money than men making films about women. It's very interesting. And it was something that made us continue with our commitment to distributing films which are both by women directors and about women's perspectives. But I also wanted to do this panel particularly because I spend a lot of time at pitching forums around the world, and what I see often are women sitting by themselves at tables. Very rarely do I see a man sitting by himself at a table pitching their project. And in fact, in the meetings that I had this year at the Meat Market, I met with maybe some of you who are here, some women who were brave enough to go it alone and be producing and directing their own projects. And what we've seen, and it actually was at the Sundance Film Festival a couple of years ago that I noticed that so many of the films by women were produced by women in teams, by women who were co-producing and directing together, like Rachel Grady and Heidi Ewing, for example. And we started thinking that really, and well, the other thing is that the question that we get asked most often is, how do I find a producer? So that's where I came up with the idea for this panel. And I have to say that the festival decided to call it Secrets of Successful Producers for Women and Other Filmmakers. And thank you for those of you who are the others in the room. And really, I want to say that it's really coming from this idea that I want to encourage women producers to produce for women directors. And I want to encourage men to produce for women directors. I think that women need that help to get their films out there. And I think it's really one of the strategies that we can best employ. We also believe that networking and mentoring is really important. So we've decided to end the session with a networking reception, and you're all invited for drinks afterwards. I know that's why half of you came. And there'll be other people, I'm sure, joining us to celebrate both Women Make Movies' 40th anniversary and Films Transit's 30th anniversary. Films Transit is a fantastic international sales agent, so we're really pleased to be with them today. So, without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists and thank them right off from the start from agreeing to be here and share their secrets. I also have an announcement to make. Unfortunately, Femke Walting from Submarine in Holland had a production emergency and couldn't be here today. But we're very, very lucky because we have Caroline Libresco to my left, who is, as many of you know, a senior programmer at the Sundance Film Festival. But what you might not know is that she's also a producer. And she's on the leadership committee for the producing initiative at Sundance. Caroline was formerly a production exec at ITVS. She's actually on the Women Make Movies board, and she's the producer of Barrier Device, a short film by Grace Lee, Sunset Story, which she made for ITVS, I believe, and is currently involved with 2 projects. One, An American Revolutionary, the story of Grace Lee Boggs, and I can't remember the other.
It's okay.
Yeah? Okay. To her left is Julie Goldman from Motto Pictures. We've been calling Julie the producer of the decade in the United States because she's got an amazing, amazing list of films that she's produced recently and is currently involved with. Believe it or not, she only founded her company Motto Pictures in 2009, and since then she was nominated for the PGA Producer of the Year Award for Sergio, which was shortlisted for the Documentary Feature Academy Award. She was a consultant on The Cove. She recently completed Buck, an extraordinary film that was at Sundance and has now played on over 500 screens. Buck, which she brought with her. An amazing film, seriously. And I got to meet Buck watching the football game at Sundance, which was really fun. She also is a producer of Finding North, which was at Sundance this year, and the Ai Weiwei Never Sorry film. She's currently producing a number of great films: The Great Invisible by Margaret Brown, God Loves Uganda, directed by Roger Ross Williams, and Gideon's Army by Dawn Porter. To her left is Natasha Deck, who probably is familiar to some of you here. Natasha is with Tiger Lily Pictures. When I first started coming to Sheffield, everybody said to me, "You have to meet Tiger Lily Pictures. They are fantastic." And she actually has been working with her fellow producer, Nikki Parrott, as somebody else who you may know, since 2000. And she's produced and executive produced a variety of films for the BBC and for Channel 4, including, including film I love, 37 Uses for a Dead Sheep, Dolce Vita Africana, Black Power Salute, and After the Apocalypse, which she did for Channel 4. To her left is, and I just realized that without Femke, we are all English-speaking, from English-speaking countries, but tried to get some people from, some of those wonderful women from Denmark, but they just weren't coming this year. But Pat Fisk is a producer extraordinaire from Australia, definitely traveled the furthest to get here. Pat is, as I said, the producer of Scarlet Road, which is screening at the festival. She also is she was awarded this prestigious Stanley Hawkes Award for her outstanding commitment to the documentary industry in Australia at the AIDC. Sorry about that. She's also the producer of Rocking the Foundations, Woolloomooloo, For All the World to See, an amazing film, a portrait of Professor Fred Hollows. And I believe that you directed a number of those as well. So we have an amazing group of women here that have years and years and years of experience that they're going to share with us. We're going to do this very informally. Sorry, I've been talking so much. I promise I won't. From this point on, I'll just ask questions. And I'm going to just start it off and ask each of you to respond to whichever questions you want. And then we're going to open it up very quickly so that all of you can ask questions that you want. So maybe I will just ask you to all just kind of go through one by one and talk about how you decided to become a producer. I'll just say one other thing. I was talking with somebody about this panel, and I said today is a celebration of the producer, because the producers are often the people behind the scenes. They don't get a lot of the glory. Directors are always considered the director's film, not the producer's film. So I want to congratulate and salute all of you and celebrate you and find out how you made that decision to be that person behind the scenes as opposed to being a director. And for you, Pat, how you manage being a director and a producer. So why don't you start, Pat?
Oh, okay. I have a bit of a long story, which I'll try to make it short. I grew up in the United States. In early 70s, I went to Australia to be with my partner, and I was a speech pathologist, and I got there and they wouldn't accept my credentials, so I had to do something else with my life. And I ended up in Sydney and got involved in the women's movement, the left. And somehow, like the new government, Whitlam government, put money into the arts. And there are all these filmmaking workshops. So I went to every one I could. And I actually learned how to make films that way. And so I just jumped in. I wanted to make films I wanted to make documentaries, and I wanted to make films that I was really passionate about. At the time, I was very idealistic and wanted to change the world. And so I directed, for about 25 years, and I often produced my own work, but sometimes I got a producer to work with as well. then finally in 1999, a young filmmaker came to see me, Catherine Scott, with an extraordinary project, and I was like, yes, yeah, I'll work with you. So and then I started on a producing role as well, and in 2002, I got a job working at the I was co-head of the documentary department at AFTAS, the Australian Film, Television, and Radio School, and I found that directing while I shared the job, and I found directing was almost impossible, but I found producing I could do, and so I started producing a lot more then, and now I do both. So.
I'll just ask you one thing, Pat. What's the difference for you, the biggest difference between producing and directing?
Time.
Time.
I mean, well, time, because, it's such concentrated time to do the research, the writing, and producing, you can do little bits here, there, everywhere. You don't have to be so concentrated, so I find that's a big difference. And I quite like, and especially after working 6 years at the film school, I like helping people realize their vision. So, yeah.
Great. Natasha?
I always thought that the film industry was really difficult to get into. When I did a language degree at university, and when I was there, I really enjoyed doing stage management for student theatre productions. And I'd always wanted to work in the film industry, but it just seemed so kind of, the doors were closed to people like me. It felt very nepotistic, and I didn't know anyone in the film industry. So when I left college, I just wrote letters to everyone. It was in the days before people, emailed CVs out. So I wrote letters and got a huge amount of rejections, which for some bizarre reason I filed them all. And I found that file the other day, like 97 rejection letters. But one woman actually decided she liked something in the letter that I'd written her, and she was actually a commercials producer. And I had very kind of lofty ambitions that it had to be film, and then I just thought, sod it, I have to get experience in this area. So I ended up working for her and producing commercials basically for TV. And then she went off to have a baby after I'd been working there for about 8 months, and I kind of took over producing, and it was really good fun for a while. I was learning loads and learning a lot about how to deal with people, and as well as budgets and schedules and all those sorts of things. And then I just got a bit kind of it didn't feel like it was a place where I wanted to be, so I ended up applying to work on a TV production, and I went in at a very low level, so I was a production secretary, and it was just basically doing call sheets and things every day. It was, but it was a good kind of foot on the ladder, I guess. And then at the same time, I heard about a film school in London called the Royal College of Art, which actually doesn't run anymore, and I went along, and I wasn't thinking about applying, but I knew that they needed outside producers to come in and produce for the student directors who didn't have producers. So I thought, this is a good way of me going from being production secretary to producer. So I ended up producing a student film there, and then they announced their applications were out for the next year. So I just thought I'll apply and see what happens. And I got onto the course. It was an MA course, and it was just brilliant because I really used that time to sort of try and do everything that I could and learn about everything, editing and not directing. I was never interested in directing, and when I was there, I got a commission from BBC to make a short film, produce a short film for them for a scheme they used to run called 10 by 10. And I just really got the taste for it. And then those 2 years at film school ended, and I was like, what do I do now? Because all the directors on the course were getting picked up by agents and being given directing jobs. And I realised that as a producer, you're only as good as you are the projects that you have. So very kind of naively, I think, me and another producer from the film school, Nikki, my business partner, decided we were going to set up our own company, which we did. You know, we went down to the stationers and bought all the documents you needed to do it, and filed the form and paid our 200 quid, and just carried on from there, really. So,
well, what was the first film that you produced with Nikki?
Well, we had a company making music videos for a while, so we did lots of terrible girl bands from the sort of, you'll probably remember, but I'm too embarrassed to say, from the late 90s. But the first... Well, we got commissions from Channel 4 and BBC to make some dramas for them. And I think that was when we sort of...
Yeah, because you've also done fiction besides documentary.
Yeah. So I think that was when we thought...
She is Chinese, I believe. Yeah. Great film.
So, yeah, that was when we thought, okay, let's be serious about this now.
Great. Yeah. Julie?
When I first met you, I was at First Run Icarus Films, which is an educational distributor a non-theatrical distributor in New York. And I was there part-time, and then the person who ran international left, and I started to do international sales and co-productions as well. So I kind of got this experience on the distribution side to start with. But I was still in school. I was still in film school. Wow. And so I would also, while I was in film school, I realized I had also zero interest in directing. And so people wanted me to organize their shoots and to figure things out for them. So I essentially just started to produce by kind of natural selection with everybody else wanted to direct. So, and that's really where it started. And I learned everything also. I mean, I did grip work. I did everything so that I would be able to, when an electrician would turn to me and say something about, voltage, I would be able to respond. Now I couldn't because I'd forgotten it all. But at the time, I was into learning every single aspect so that I, as a producer, could stand up and not be bullshitted, basically, by anybody on the crew. And I encourage that, actually. I think that's a really important thing. Editing as well, like you were saying. And then I went off and did horrible music videos, hip-hop music videos, and they would always be 24 hours long, the shoot. And the crew hated you by the end, so that was horrible. And I did a feature, and as I was doing that, all of the films that I had worked on in distribution were documentaries, and really wonderful collection. And I realized that's what I wanted to go back to, so I decided to make a living and work at a company called Wellspring, Windstar, Fox Lover. It had many companies that were shoved together under a corporate telco, essentially. But I luckily got this freedom of running their production unit, and we did films like Mama Africa, we did Devil's Playground, which is about the Amish kids taking a break, and it was a co-production with Channel 4. So, kind of went into it through that, and then went off on my own with two other women who I had worked at that company with, and we started a company and had it for about 7 years. And then 2.5 years ago, I left there to start Motto because I didn't want, for a lot of reasons. Let's leave it at that. But what's interesting is, kind of what you were talking about. It's since Motto was formed, we've really worked with probably 75% of the directors are women who we work with, and that was not intentional, but it was very organic in the way of finding projects that kind of spoke to us and that we wanted to work on. And it's been a great experience in a lot of ways because it's been a number of first-time women directors. And that part has been a really, really interesting learning experience for me, and on how to work with people who need a different kind of, I think working with women is incredibly rewarding in so many ways, but it's also, it's a dynamic thing that you really need to work in a different way than you kind of feel like you can just tell men what to do. And it's a good thing, not in a bad way, but there's no, you're just and it's done, you kind of figure it out, but it's do you find that?
A process. It's called a process.
So it's been great. It's been really, and we do have men on the films too. We're working with Greg Barker and Roger Ross Williams and wonderful male directors. But it's been kind of a fun growth experience of finding these projects and working with different partnerships. Yeah, and Buck was amazing, because Buck was all women, and I had never had this experience. I mean, everybody except for the composer, who we all ended up being mad at, were women, and it was just great. It really was. I mean, it was, Cindy had never directed a film, and a lot of us were there to kind of like be there for her, and Andrea Medic, who's amazing, was our exec producer, and so we had this, and Toby Shimon, his incredible editor, and so we had this team, and there were no egos. Somehow it just was this beautiful flow, and it's like we joke, it takes a lot of women to make a film about a cowboy, and but it's true. We were making this film, like you said, about a man.
Yeah.
And Debbie, the funniest thing is when we saw Debbie, when I saw you, she was watching a football game, and we irritated her by like interrupting her table. She had staked out this spot. It was like the Super Bowl or something. And she was in this bar in Sundance, and she kind of looks up, and she does like a real triple take, like a classic cinema triple take as Buck, that he's standing right there. So it was very funny. You don't usually see a guy like in the hat.
With a cowboy hat, even at Sundance. Speaking of Sundance, Caroline.
Can you hear this if I just lean back like this? You can hear me? Okay,
yeah.
Great. I'm a different, I don't even really, I call myself a sometime producer. So in a weird way, I don't belong on this successful producer panel, because for me, programming and curating film and writing have been synonymous with producing. Like they all came at the same time. It's all inextricable for me. And it's like when the year that I got my first programming job, I made my first feature. It was all, and I felt somehow a kind of a necessary link between the two. I felt that I wasn't going to be a good programmer if I couldn't also make films. And I felt that maybe I would be a better filmmaker, producer, if I really understood cinema in a different way, and the business of cinema, which is a lot of what programming is also. So it started like that, and I realized now as I was thinking that I've only made 3 feature-length film. No, I haven't even made. Well, the third is almost finished. So it's really not that much, and a couple of shorts. But in the last, say, 15 years of working as a programmer, but so they're very few and far between, because I have a full-time job, so it's like my hobby in a weird way. But each of those projects have been a writing project for me too. The first feature I made was I was the co-writer on it with the director. The 2 feature docs that Sunset Story and now this An American Revolutionary, are films that I consider myself a co-writer on. We don't take writing credits, but these are projects where we're writing while we're shooting, we're writing while we're writing grant proposals, we're writing while we're in the edit room, we're writing when we go back out to shoot, we're writing when we're talking on the phone with a potential funder and pitching. We're still honing what the film's about, and so for me, the writing process in documentary is happening all the way along, and that's actually what drives me to produce. So for me, again, here's another inextricability between producing and writing, or producing and story structure. So I wouldn't be interested in producing unless it was that process. So I just put that right out there. And the question of finance and distribution and business, I'm not a natural business person, but because I work so much in the industry and the business, that comes a little more easily, but although still is really, really, really hard. And the truth is, I'm not able to make a living as a producer. I know that about myself. I'm just not hard-hearted enough. I'm not, what I meant to say was thick-skinned enough. Not hard-hearted. You guys have plenty of heart. I didn't mean to say that. But I'm really not thick-skinned enough to stake my living on producing. In the United States, it's really, in a way, Julie she is such a shining star because she's able to have so much output. It's really difficult to make a living in the United States as a producer, whether you make features or producers, and only the creme de la creme can really do that. So that's just a reality of the unsustainability of our independent film industry in the United States.
So there's many different kinds of producers. Julie, I've heard you say that you're a creative producer. You just said that you're not so into or kind of begrudgingly do the business side. You're always the writer.
But it has to be in relation to story.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering if you could all talk about there are many, many different kinds of producer. Are you the kind of producer that raises the money? Are you a creative producer? Do you get involved with the production? And how do you find the projects that you produce? And anybody can just jump in and answer.
Well, how do I find the projects that I produce? In a number of ways, really. People bring ideas to us as a company because they've seen something what we've made before that resonates with them. Or sometimes we generate ideas ourselves, and then we'll find the director that we think is most appropriate to realise that film. But I mean, the thing that's really important to me when people bring ideas to us is that they have to know who the audience for that film is. So, for example, if it's a TV project, they have to know what slot it's going to go out at, and what channel's best for it. And if they don't, then if they don't know their audience, then are they just making the film for themselves? And that's the question I ask myself. And if that's, I'm not interested if yes is the answer to that. So, yeah.
Wow, I actually never would have thought that. I would have thought that I'd come to you with an idea and say, I have this fantastic idea, don't you love it? And you'd say, oh, that sounds great for that slot. So that's really interesting.
No, I would expect filmmakers to know who their audience is. Well, obviously, if people bring brilliant ideas to us, and we'll get really enthused and behind them, and we'll, try our damnedest to get them made.
Yeah, and if they come to you, do they have to have found any money yet, or will you just take on, and you will raise all the money?
Yeah. I mean, it helps if there's money attached.
Okay, that's the woman to talk to.
Yeah. Projects come to us in all sorts of different stages. So.
And you work across multiple projects at the same time.
Yeah. So how it works at Tiger Lily is that Nikki and I tend to have different projects.
Speak up just a little.
Sorry. How it works at Tiger Lily is that Nikki and I tend to have different projects that we're the kind of lead producer on, but we have to agree, both of us, that we want to take a project on for it to go through the company.
I like to work with the director in obtaining the money, because I feel that a team, it works better having a team, and you can be dynamic and go back and forth when you're pitching, and I find that works best. I feel that I'm a creative producer. I'm on the project all the way through, from the very beginning. I prefer to get the project when it's in its infancy, and work with the director all the way through. And but the money thing works better with the two of you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the ideal world, you are able to, especially if you're doing grant writing, that kind of work, you definitely need to work with the director on raising money. And I think it just varies. Sometimes you can go to one. I mean, it's always a process. Certainly in America, it's because the funding situation is constantly changing, and you don't have really. I mean, except for a couple of places, you don't have the consistency of, like, Nick Fraser's been in television for X amount of years. You can really not point to too many people that in the same way in the U.S. But so you kind of always have to reinvent funding, and yeah, I mean, I think funding is a huge part of my job, actually, raising money and kind of trying to come up with something new, or somebody who's never invested because you think there's one chance and they'll probably never invest again, so you want to be that person for that one chance. And it's really, I think that's part of creative producing, actually, is really creatively funding as well. And then sometimes it's lucky, and you do a film with Participant, or you do a film with HBO, and they give you all the money, and it's like, I don't even know what to do now. It's so great, it's just, and that's part of it, is mixing up projects that can have that full funding and some that you're raising money for years, is what, to kind of go across a number of projects at once. And also, what I do is I am often a producer, but I'm also often an exec producer. So there's a less kind of intensity and hands-on. And so I can do a lot of projects at once. And they all seem like they finish at one time. People are like, oh, you do so many films. But it's more like, oh, well, I've been working on that for 8 years, but it's just finishing now at the same time that something that started 9 months ago is finishing. So it just seems like a lot at once. But it really is like working in the ideal world. It's finding projects in early days and helping shape the materials that you're going to go out and raise money for the film on, and then kind of being there through the whole process creatively and really partnering as much as possible. Not necessarily being on the shoots every shoot, or sometimes never on the shoots, but talking to the director through that process and through what they're doing, and making sure that if they're going to Uganda, that they're going to be safe and you have a good fixer, and you have, all of that has to be part of what I do. And then really I love the editing process and kind of being there through that, and then strategizing and thinking about which festival, and if that festival won't take it, then what the next festival would be, kind of having Caroline let me down easy and that kind of thing. So it's just, it seems like it's just, it's always in some phase. I mean, Buck was finished and released a year ago in the U.S. You wouldn't know it, but it was released here, a month ago, because the distributor put it in one theater in Leicester Square at 12:30. But so you really have to kind of stay on it. So I was here with Buck at BBC inaugural breakfast in Manchester, doing publicity a year later. So it can be something that you just keep going and going and going, and sometimes it kind of takes off and has a life of its own.
Did you want to add anything, Caroline?
No, just that I'm, again, like a really different kind of producer, because I'm not actually as much of a producer as these three titans. But and my relationships are about long-term relationships with two directors, two women directors. And so the films, so far anyway, have come out of these deep, old friendships and literally like decades-long conversations about questions that we have about the world. And the characters that we end up exploring are sort of a way of continuing that conversation. So it's a really different approach. It's coming out of or more organic from my life and my friendships. So, but I am really committed to women directors also, because the collaboration is so crucial and so core to what's pleasurable. This is my hobby in a way. Like, I don't make my living from it, so it has to be, when I'm in that zone of pleasure in a way with story, it's about collaboration around story and ideas. And so without that, I'm not as interested in doing all the grant writing and all of the pitching. So I have to make sure of that, and I think that's why it comes out of those kinds of relationships. So I'm sure everyone here would agree that on some level the quality of the relationship with your creative partners is crucial, I'm sure. But I guess in my case it's more extreme. Yeah.
Before I ask another question, I just realized I want to ask all of you, how many of you are directors? You raise your hands up high. A lot. Okay. How many of you are producers? Oops. Sorry. Okay. How many of you are producers and directors of your own projects? Okay. That's really interesting. Great. So can you all tell us how can directors work better with producers? I oftentimes hear horror stories, I have to be honest. We work with a lot of teams. Sometimes they don't actually finish the films intact because they get into trouble. So, yeah, how can directors work better with producers, or how can producers work better with directors? Either way you want to go.
Well, for me, it's about trust and confidence, really. That's the most important thing. You've got to trust that your director can make the film and have confidence in their abilities to do so. But I think what's really important is talking and talking and talking and talking, over decades, even. Just so everyone is really clear about what the film is going to be before anyone's even picked up a camera. So that's a really key thing for me. And on the films where those sort of important early conversations haven't been had, I don't think those films are that great, I have to say. So, yeah. And I'm talking about things I've worked on myself. So.
Anybody else?
I mean, I think what's so important is, I think that one thing which we've been trying to address with our producing initiative at Sundance is to create a broader sense of what a creative producer is, and that Julie's point and everyone's point, that the creativity isn't just in the editing room. It's not just on the shoot or on the set. It's at every stage of the game. That the whole, and that what I'd like for directors to be more educated about what a producer can be, and think of producers as partners, as creative partners, at every step of the process, because otherwise, directors are missing out on the value of that relationship and what that can produce in terms of a better film. And what we see in the American independent movement is that better films come out of stronger development and out of more collaboration from producers on the creative side. So again, and this is exactly what you're talking about, Natasha, talking through what is the film really about at every stage. So that, and also you can't on your own be the only one pitching an idea if that idea consistently is developing and changing, which it does in documentary. And we're talking about documentaries here. It's like something that's evolving as the film gets shot, as the film gets edited, right? You're discovering what the film's about in a dialectic with the process. And so you have a guardian in your producer who can help you both formulate and then protect the idea. And that's what I'd really like to see, more of an understanding of that. And that's, it's an elusive qualitative idea, but
it's great to have someone that you can talk to. I mean, from my experience as a director, having a producer and also being a producer, that you can call it any time of the day and night, and you've got this idea of like brainstorm, and you can just talk through that with them at any time, and they're always there. It makes you feel strong and not lonely, and you're not doing it all by yourself. And I find that it makes for better projects and everything.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to delineate what you're doing, not only the vision of the film, but how you can support each other and how you can complement each other through the process. And sometimes directors are just kind of like, yeah, go raise some money for me and then come back and I'll give you a nod. And it doesn't really work that way. And there are certainly producers that you can go to that will do that, but it's, you have to, if at the beginning you don't have a meeting of the minds in kind of all facets of how you're going to go forward, it can get really ugly and it can get really, uncomfortable.
When is the right time for a director to find a producer? Is it better before they've shot anything? I mean, is it kind of like, I spend my day today and yesterday at the meat market, and most filmmakers have clips and trailers. Do they have to have a clip or a trailer to show you? Do they have to have shot something, or can it just be a concept? And have you ever gotten involved with a project that was maybe halfway done?
Well, I mean, I got involved with Ai Weiwei when it was in last stages of edit and as an exec producer, and it was really because, it was such an exciting project. Allison, so, just this young dynamo, and she had done everything on her own. And so it was really like, okay, let's make sure that she started to get some support with a team, and I was like, I really want to make sure you have the support you should have because this project's going to be amazing. But also, wait, what was the first part of what you said?
I don't remember.
At what point should a director?
What point should a director come to
sometimes it's a concept, and you figure out a way to just put together a few pennies and go and shoot. You can shoot something unless it's travel or something that makes it prohibitive. You can really shoot something pretty. I love when somebody comes in with something to show. That's certainly something they've started to write, even if it's not really formed, and even ideas that they've started to shoot. I think is better than just a thought for me.
I prefer to come at it at the very beginning, but I've also taken on projects that are halfway through and can be rewarding either way, but I do have a preference to be there from the very beginning.
What about Tiger Lily?
In any form, really. It just depends on. In any form, it just depends on whether we react to the material or not. If someone's shot half the film, if we react to the material and we love it, then we'll get involved. Likewise, if it's a concept and we're blown away by it, we'll get involved then.
And I think probably a lot of us work repeatedly with same filmmakers, so it's also like, you have somebody, they don't have to show you something because at some point you have this language together where they just tell you what they're thinking and you can visualize it because you know their style. And I know you work repeatedly with some of the same directors too, I imagine you do, Pat. And you obviously work with the same directors.
So
I'm just unimaginative.
So I have another question. A filmmaker came to me today and told me that they had just taken on or made an agreement with a producer in a European country, not their own, because they were interested in getting money from the television production company in that country. And oftentimes we see films that have so many producers. What's your experience with that? Is that a good thing to do? What should filmmakers look out for in that situation? Best practices?
We actually had a very similar experience with that with Julie on Goth Cruise, which was a feature documentary about goths going on a Caribbean cruise. With
normals, as they call them.
Yeah, the norms.
The normals.
Which Jeannie Finley directed. And we'd been talking to Independent Film Channel about coming in and financing the film, and Julie just came in and made it happen. And that was brilliant. That was a really, really good experience working with.
And that company no longer funds documentaries, of course.
Yeah. So we'd raised about half the budget out of the UK through a regional film fund. We couldn't get a UK broadcaster on board, and then it fitted really well. And I think that was the first.
And then we did Alexis Arquette with A&E.
Yeah,
that was fun. It was like Alexis Arquette's going to have is transgender and going to have a sex change, and the broadcaster's like, when's it coming off? And it never did. And then Alexis left midway to go film The Surreal Life of like kind of has-beens in a house, kind of a thing. Secondary. What do you call them? Z-level stars, celebrities, and left. Literally, we have like a shot of the car going away. So it was a complicated shoot, but it was the same kind of thing. It was a co-production with Channel 4 and A&E, and so you had execs from those channels as well, which can be, when it all gets complicated like that, it can be weird. But I mean, you work a lot of times with like broadcasters or co-production partners in Europe, or don't you?
Yeah, I think it's because of the sort of films that we have made in the past. I mean, we're not doing so much of them anymore, I guess, but the kind of Storyville type co-productions where you're going to get a small amount of your budget out of the UK. So we go to Auteur and ZDF in France and Germany, and all the small broadcasters in Scandinavia, and so we've got quite a good relationship with all those broadcasters now, I hope. So we go back to them with new projects and then see if they'll come on board. And I think what Nikki and I are very good at is finding funds. So we're very good at sort of milking the regions and then finding things like media TV broadcasting money, which is free money in Europe for your film. They put 20% of your documentary budget into your film, and it's fantastic. I mean, the form filling is a nightmare, and we always have rows about whose turn it is to fill the form in. But it's worth it because it's a grant, non-repayable. So.
But I mean, you're unusual because usually, you go, like Debbie was saying, and you get your French co-producer and your, Swedish co-producer, and you have, to negotiate credits, and it's. I mean, I don't really do that because none of them really want to work with the U.S. But
There's no benefit.
Exactly, no treaties. But you really have surpassed that because you guys have those relationships with the broadcasters, which I think is pretty unusual, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's as a producer, it's really important to be out. Really important to be here. Really important to go to ID for Tribeca hot dogs. You just got to get out there and be seen.
How do you get commissioning editors to pay attention to you? I mean, I'm looking at you, Natasha, because you are European, and this is where the commissioning editor system really was born and lives strongest. But for you guys, it's like, tell us some secrets. How do you get the money? What do you do?
It's being tenacious, really.
Not too tenacious.
Tenacious, but not too tenacious.
Yeah,
Don't pitch in the bathroom. We always say that.
None of that, but...
Try to have a real conversation. That's, to me, I think, really important. If you go over and you're like, I want, then somebody's going to feel like they're backing away. If you go over and you try to find a common place, then it becomes a relationship, and it's no longer about your roles. And I love Sheffield for that, because Sheffield, at night at that bar, at the hotel, you're all getting blasted, and you're all hanging out, and it's very different than other places where people are kept very separate, industry and filmmakers, and you feel like you're, kind of like off, you know, supposed to be like knocking to get in. And this is very inclusive, I think, and very different in that way.
Yeah, I oftentimes tell filmmakers that if they are not an outgoing kind of person, that they should bring their very best friend that's an outgoing person with them to film festivals so that they can chat up people, because it is so much about relationships and, yeah, hanging out. So give us one, before I open up for questions, what's the one thing that you've done really right and or the one thing that you've done really wrong, that if you could do it over again, let's do that one. If you could do something over again in terms of producing, what would you do? What would you do over again? Or tell us a horror story, something fun.
I think that I would, I made one mistake. I didn't vet a director. I knew this person, but I wish I would have asked other producers that this person had worked with. I mean, it was a nightmare, and I do not ever want to repeat it. So I will always vet. I will always ask people, and I think that directors should ask other filmmakers that have worked with the producers they're thinking of working with as well.
So the answer for the filmmakers that I had talked to today would be to ask filmmakers who have worked with that producer, is that person a good producer?
Yeah.
Are they trustworthy? Did they come through with the money? And before we end, I do want to ask a little bit about the money and how these things happen. But yeah, thanks, Pat. Natasha, you have something? You've done one thing wrong, I know. I know you're perfect, but...
No, I've done so many. I can't think of anything particular, but I'll move on to Julie.
Alexis Arquette was kind of like the thing we did wrong. We just talked about, you know, trusting that this person was, you know, kind of, and poor Nikki was, you know, like stuck in LA with Alexis, you know, just going to his therapy sessions, her therapy sessions.
Yeah, I think. Well, I didn't produce the Alexis film, but I can remember her on Christmas Day, alone in a hotel room in LA, just going, what is this about? He won't talk to me. It's Christmas Day. Yeah.
So then, if not something that you did wrong, what's like the one thing that you've learned that you think would be most helpful for people to keep in mind, besides talking a lot in developing the project?
Having fun, actually. I think having fun. I think films take so long to put together and make and edit and distribute and get out there, and you're going to be spending a lot of time in that producer-director team. You're going to be spending a lot of time together, and I think it's really important to have fun and be able to kind of put production issues aside and be able to have a conversation and a drink, go out for a meal, you know.
So if you have a fight at your first meeting, it's not the right person.
But it's also being able to really have I totally agree. Like, you have to be able to have a laugh. I mean, if you can't, you know, you're going to be going into some miserable and serious situations, and if you can't kind of be each other's release in that way, it can be really extra trying, you know, if you have people that. And also, I mean, I think there's this balance of you need to be nurturing as a producer. I mean, I think that's a natural kind of extension of producing is nurturing the creativity and the people that you're working with. And I think that it's that balance, though, because you don't want to be so nurturing that you're mommy, you know. So especially me, I never want to be mommy. So you know,
no, you're daddy.
I'm auntie.
You're auntie.
That's what I like. Jay, who did Beware of Mr. Baker, would be like, oh, you're like a mom. I mean, he had real mother issues, and I was saying, no, I'm never say that kind of a thing. And but it's really true. I mean, you really need to. It's finding the sweet spot, and it's also trusting your instinct and honing an instinct and trusting it. Because if you can't really feel it, then it's probably not the right project for you. If you really don't feel the connection with the person, they're probably not the real person for you. It's just, it's common sense, I suppose.
Yeah. I was just thinking of something, it came up sort of in the melee of what you were all saying, but yesterday I was watching the beginning of The Law in These Parts, which is an extraordinary film that's at this festival, and I just want to plant this idea. It says in the final credit, it says a film by not just the director Ra'anan Alexandrowicz, but the producer Liran Atzmor, and they have worked together on 4 films. This is the first time it's a film by the both of them. wow, that's a radical, I know this is not answering the earlier question, but what a radical idea. And I asked Ranan, who was standing next to me, how that came about. He said, this was a really hard film to make, and Liran is my creative partner. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, that's great.
So I want to put that out there. I want to plant a radical seed, because why not? But also, so the hardest, the right thing and the wrong thing. I think for me, the wrong thing was not allowing, like on one of the films I've worked on, sort of feeling sort of protective of the team, and when a third person wanted to come in and be a co-producer, we actually really needed her, but feeling sort of too protective of the material and the process that we had been through, this really intense process of raising all the money and getting through the edit. But at that point, actually, we really needed her to take over and deal with our festivals and deal with distribution and deal with deliverables. And she was in a great position to do that, and I resisted it. And it caused all kinds of unnecessary problems. So I think the lesson I learned from that is, it's okay, I mean, don't let a million people in, but it's kind of a tag team situation, because it's such a long process, could be very helpful to everyone, and it's okay to have one more producer on the credits. It's really okay. And the other right thing is just to have faith, if you have in your gut, is to really develop that sense of what a story is. What is a story? If you get excited about the ideas, just start to trust your story gut as a producer or a director. And have faith that even though you don't understand yet what the story structure is going to be, to have faith that if you had that initial gut feeling, that it might actually become a story, like a film.
I also want to say that, like, Caroline has, I mean, you go to festivals as a producer, and you are not given tickets, you're certainly not representing the film. I mean, you're kind of like some dirtball that they picked up on the way. And it's unbelievable how often that's happened. And it's incredibly insulting, especially if you've been working on the film for the whole life of it. And a lot of times, of course, you work with a director who, it's wonderful, and they include you and everything, but you just feel like the tag on. And Caroline has worked her ass off to develop something at Sundance which really does appreciate and embrace and nurture the producer. What a concept. I mean, really, they've changed the way they do ticketing. So people on the team now, if you're the cinematographer, the editor, or a key person on the team, the producer, you can actually get tickets, not only to your movie, but maybe to somebody else's movie. I mean, it's unbelievable when you think, it seems so weird, but it's really true. The prevalence of the director as God and the producer as a non-entity. And it's like, who wants to whine and complain? But it's great to start to feel this inclusive, I guess, kind of new wave is very exciting.
Yeah, I think the auteurism, sometimes I say the auteur is dead, but I like to argue about that.
Yeah, I'll tell a story on myself that I once had a dinner in Amsterdam for our filmmakers. We had about 5 films in the festival that year, and I didn't invite the producer of one of the films, who happened to also be the sales agent. She was so angry with me, and I realize now what a mistake that I made. But I think that we all have to really, really think about, who is making these films. I got a little tripped up because she also happened to be the sales agent, but that doesn't take away from the fact that she was a producer. So I think I'll open it up. I will ask you to raise your hand, and this very nice woman here is going to come with a mic so that we can record this. All the way in the back, I see Jennifer's hand is up.
How we are inciting a revolution. We should.
Hi, and thank you very much for all of your very enlightening comments. I'd like to ask a question that sort of follows up on where Deb was going, and that has to do with when things go wrong and there is a crisis, or looks like there's going to be a crisis on any production. Could you talk about one that you've faced and how you managed to resolve it, each one of you, how you found your way out of it specifically?
Oh, I can't talk about that.
They're trying to think of ones that they can actually share.
Yeah, well, nothing too specific. I don't want to,
Just the general situation.
Well, I mean, I executive produced a film where the producer and director had a physical altercation, and it became quite ugly, and there was a huge split in the production, and also it involved the broadcaster. It was very complicated. So I would say that, I mean, you know, there was really, you know, how to manage that was basically kind of talking to everybody very separately, and talking to the people at the broadcaster because this was a legal situation, and talking to the lawyers because this was a legal situation, and then really spending time talking to the director, talking to the producer, and trying to find, and I mean, it really was crisis management, and just kind of trying to be as logical and clear and unemotional as possible, because when everybody gets emotional, if you can break that down and just go into your logic mode, you are going to get somewhere, whereas otherwise everybody's just going to keep fighting. So, I mean, I guess that's one example. I've had a lot of crises. Yes.
I think one that I've been involved in is where the material that's come back from the shoot hasn't been what we thought it was going to be. And that was a big problem because the finances and broadcasters weren't happy with it. So basically, myself and Nikki, who was producing, we were both producing it, we looked through every single piece of the footage to try and find if there was anything that was going to deliver what the broadcaster wanted.
And you did.
Yeah, and we did, yeah.
Is there another question? Pat, go for it.
Just, for me, the problem that I spoke about before, I had to really let go of everything, you know, emotion. It was my company. I had to finish the film. It was, I was, you know, responsible. So I just gritted my teeth, and I did it as calmly as I could with the discussions, and proceeded to the, you know, to the final film that we finished. Sometimes working with the editor myself, because the director was nowhere to be found, you know, that kind of thing. But I just had to be really calm and go through it, because I didn't want bad blood. I didn't want the broadcaster to be involved, you know, so I just worked through it as best I could. But it took a lot out of me.
What? You thought of one?
You just reminded me of another one. A good one. We had a financier who had never done documentaries before as a feature company, and they financed this documentary, and then midway through they decided to fire the director who had developed the project with the production team and producer. And it was so painful, and it was so horrible, and we had no control of it because, you know, it was like a bonded film. I mean, it was like they were doing it like a Hollywood film because that's all they knew how to do. And that was really hard, and just trying to, you know, the producer felt so loyal to the director because they had developed it together, and he's a fantastic producer. And the director has gone on to make many very successful films. But that kind of a thing that can happen, and when you're like responsible, because you're the producer, you're responsible to the financier. It's really awkward. It's horrible. I mean, you really want to just fight for this person, but also in this case, that person actually hadn't. Like you said, you're looking through the footage and you didn't get it. They didn't have the footage. And I didn't have real confidence that they could pull it off. And the person who came in to replace them did pull it off. But that kind of thing is also something. I mean, you will find yourself in really hairy situations where you feel like, I'll never get out of this. I'll never, you know, this will, like, you know, going to ruin my career, and it's going to ruin the next year. And you do. You just figure it out.
Well, you know, I have a question. Do you all have final cut on the films that you produce? If a director comes to you with a project and it's their idea, they've kind of, but then they bring it to you, do you guys have final cut? No? It's the director's cut.
Bring in the financing.
Yeah,
their version.
Right.
I think it depends on the project, really.
But I do recommend hammering out, I don't know if you guys do this, hammering out a creative agreement, that there be reasonable creative collaboration before a decisive choice is made if there is some sort of dispute on creative. Do you guys do agreements?
I mean, meaningful consultation, but ultimately the director is still the auteur, and the director, in most cases, has that final say, but who has the real final say would be the people financing the film for their version, at least. So we've had films, I've worked on films, I had Nick Fraser bring me onto a film, and then they completely revamped it, and the producers were miserable, and then they turned to me like, why would you bring us such a difficult film? And it was his film. So, I mean, you know, it just, you never know what's going to happen, but it's, sometimes it can be really tough because the broadcaster wants a 60-minute version, and Americans don't like 60 minutes. They never heard that except for a news show. And it can get, again, that's another thing. I mean, co-productions, you know, different territories have really, really different, I mean, you maneuver countries all over Europe, and you do too, but I'm certainly, the US can be a nightmare to work with for filmmakers who aren't used to it, and for filmmakers who are used to it.
Yeah, these production agreements are so important. I just want to throw that out that, you know, again, as a distributor, I've been in the situation of having films get finished and the filmmakers aren't talking to one another, the producer and the director or the two co-directors, and it's really, really, really difficult. And it's also really hard. I think the hardest thing is that it's kind of like a prenuptial. You have to plan for your divorce. So you have to have a termination clause within your contract of how you're going to work together and decide if you can't work together, who owns the project, who's going to get the money, if there is any profits, who's going to have the final say over the film. And it's very difficult. So, question over there.
And credits among them.
And credits, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm a director, and I've worked with a small group of producers on short projects, and then I produced my own feature doc last year and directed it and shot it and edited it and learned a big lesson from it. So I'm now making something with a co-writer, and we've got a producer on board, so I'm kind of like going to another level or another place, maybe not another level, just another way of working. And my producer is really great when she's there, but a lot of the time she's not, because she's working on so many things. So when we do meet and when she is there, I think we really click and it's really good. But I kind of often feel sort of, you know, you were talking earlier, it's great to have this creative partner that you can call at any time and because she's working on so many other things. And I wonder if it would be, also we're in different countries. She's in Ireland, I'm here, but I'm going back and forth. And I wonder, the idea of having a co-producer has come up possibly for like a broadcaster later along the line and so on. Anyway, my question is, who should suggest having a co-producer? Is it like the bad manners for the director to suggest that, or would it come from the producer?
Well, is it that you need help with the nuts and bolts or the creative part more?
The nuts and bolts more, but I do want creative input too. I mean, this producer is creative, and I have a writer, and I have myself, so there's a lot of creativity already, I guess.
Maybe if you brought on a line producer, which I think is extremely underrated, and I don't know how often you utilize line. Do you have a lot of line producers on often?
Yes.
Yeah, to really handle the nuts and bolts, then your producer would have more time for the creative end of it. And they'd probably enjoy it more because it doesn't sound like they like the nuts and bolts so much if they're not doing it. And then you can kind of take the weight off of yourself, but also kind of open up something. I mean, I think if you that's one suggestion that's easier to make than, hey, I want somebody to do this as your kind of counterpart. But if you're not happy, you're going to have to. It doesn't matter about manners. You have to suggest it.
Okay, thank you.
I say that, but being like rude American, but it's true.
Way over there.
You?
Yeah, it was you, Sally.
Oh, great. I just wanted to ask, how involved does the producer get in the actual distribution and release of the film?
Not at all. No, I'm joking. As a distributor, I said that, but that was really just a joke.
I think it's really important that the producer is involved in that. I can't imagine not being involved in the distribution. I mean, you know, not physically getting into cinemas, but sometimes we're dropping tapes off. But no, I mean, strategizing, I think, is really, really important. So, and also asking around and finding out, you know, who the good ones are, and talking to other producers about deals that they've done with distributors as well. I think that's really important, because if you're kind of new to that side of things as a producer, you can be really stiffed on deals, and you can have your film released, you know, in a crappy cinema at a crappy time, and you know, or sort of terrible marketing materials drawn up or whatever. So I think it's really valuable to get recommendations as well. But yeah.
But also, I mean, like a line producer, it's good to have a sales rep, kind of producer's rep, because it's hard to, sometimes if you have, especially a cinema doc, then it's going to be something where you're going to have to navigate a world that you might not be comfortable, or you might just not have the time and the relationships to get the best deal. And so it's great to be able to have that kind of a partnership, and then also to find the right distributors for you who have, that's all they do is think about that landscape.
I'll just say as a distributor, it's really interesting to me because there's some films that we only deal with the producer. We really don't have a relationship with the director. The director goes off to make another film, but the producer really is that kind of business person. And I think it's another reason why it is so important to have a producer, particularly when you're first time or youngish director, because that producer has relationships, as you were saying before, with festivals and with other people in the industry and can bring that to the table. There was another question over there. Just wait for the mic. She'll be there in 1 second.
It was just a follow-on from the other question, which was about how far you go in distribution as producers. But the question is, like, how creative are you getting now with distribution? Because it seems that there are a lot more places opening up, and a lot more sort of thought seems to go into different forms of distribution. And how involved are you in that, or are you going through quite traditional distribution outlets now?
I mean, where we're from, the sort of trend right now is for producers, sadly, to also having to become experts in distribution to some degree, because again, it's such a rapidly shifting landscape that there are opportunities that you want to be able to seize on, and there's a lot of talk about parsing out rights and keeping certain rights for producers and director teams, and giving keeping some back, because, for example, many distributors do not have any idea how to do educational distribution, and that can be a huge resource source of income for producers with documentaries, at least in our country. I don't know about in Europe, but
not so much.
Not so much.
Not so much.
But for example, that's one thing where distributors and then of course the whole VOD digital realm is shifting on a daily basis, and a broadcaster, you don't necessarily want to give them your VOD rights because they don't know, they can't fully exploit them, and so you want to try to hold those back. That's something you can try to strategize with your sales agent or alone, but ideally if you have a sales agent, again, they're really up to date with a lot of that, and you can work strategically. What else about that? I mean, I think
it really is shifting. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's hard because it's what you want to do is you want to be able to say, okay, this is plan A, plan B, plan C, and so that you're not feeling like bereft if plan A doesn't happen, because you're ready to go in with the next idea. So if it's not going to be a big theatrical release, okay, well, what about television? Or if it's not going to be television, then what about getting something really clever and interesting, and some kind of a online partnership, or some kind of a iTunes. There's so many different ways now to get films out there, and everybody wants the golden chalice, but it
doesn't exist anymore. It's gone, or I think that day is gone. Yeah. It doesn't. She had it with Buck. But that was like the last time I heard of it, but not here. She had it in the U.S. with Buck, where her distributor took all rights and really exploited them.
Our distributor here really
beautifully,
sucked.
But we don't hear of that golden ticket. That golden ticket just doesn't happen very much. It happens.
And we were surprised. It wasn't like we were like, oh yeah,
where all
we're going to
rights
make
are
$4
taken
million
and exploited, and there's a great minimum guarantee, and I mean it just.
But it also won at Sundance.
Still haven't seen overages.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Can you imagine? I mean, this was like one of the most successful documentaries of last year.
It's going to be like another year before we see money.
But and how much will they see? I mean, this is why you guys are so lucky, because you can sell all your broadcast rights and actually make a budget and pay people.
Make your money out of the budget,
yeah.
Because you may never. It's very hard to make money going afterward.
There are some online deals that we've done for some of our films, and you can do non-exclusive deals. So
yeah.
Anyone can take them. But there's one particular company, and we have not seen any revenue at all from them, and it's been 2 years since they've had the film. and it's ridiculous. So I mean, I think if you go into it not expecting, you know, to make money, the money you get is going to pay for your Christmas party probably.
Right. But that's why your financing, back to financing, should
right.
come from, you know, non-recoupable funds as much as possible, like media program, right? And
Any soft money.
any soft money, foundation money, Bertha Foundation, BritDoc Foundation, et cetera. And then broadcast sales, right?
Yeah.
Broadcast licenses,
Yeah, yeah.
if you can.
What
we
about
don't
Australia?
have those, but you do.
Australia, we've got we've got Women Make Movies for North America, and we've got Cat and Docs in Europe and everywhere. But Australia, we've been able to do some non-exclusive deals with several. So we get the best of both worlds, really. So the non-exclusivity is really good.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to say to filmmakers is don't forget about screening fees, because often if, you know, big festivals are going to take your film, you can charge them a screening fee, and it took us quite a while to work that out. And often, you know, people will get in touch with you because they want to do a screening of your film because it might tie into something with their organisation. Charge them for it. Don't let them have it for free.
It's a collective screening right. You know, it can be. You can charge.
I've heard people say they've made like $50,000 on their film, just screening fees for festivals. It can be really lucrative if you're very clever.
Yeah, but you have to, with the screening fee thing, you have to be careful that when you sign your deal with a sales agent, that you keep those screening fees for yourself, because I stupidly
here's a mistake.
I stupidly signed a deal for a feature film that we produced a couple of years ago, and it allowed the sales agent to keep the film festival screening fees, and I just wish I had been on the ball enough that day that I signed it to strike that out.
And also award monies. Like if you win an award, you should keep, you know, the filmmakers should keep 100% of that.
That's very. It's
another thing to put in your contract with the director and the producer, how to share award money.
Yeah, that's really important. Having been on both sides of that situation.
Yep.
There's a question over here, I think. No. Is that Jennifer again? Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question who hasn't already? Okay, down here. And then we'll get to you, Jennifer. We've got about 15 minutes. So over there and then up front.
I should probably preface this by saying it's not a flippant question, actually. But given the nature of the relationship between producers and directors evolving, you know, finally to be recognised for what they really are, despite possibly what credits might suggest, the question is, what, in a sense, stops you, given your creative input into projects, what stops you from wanting to be director-producers, or even a director? What's, you know, clearly there's a delineation in those roles, and I'm just interested in where you kind of place that personally.
Well, Joe, I want to make a living. I don't want to spend 5 years on one film. I can't do it. I mean, I'm just kidding, because I know Joe who asked the question. But no, I mean, I think that is a big part of it. Being able to work across a lot of projects it gives you the ability to have a company and have other people working with you and kind of grow it. But sorry, I didn't mean to be so sarcastic.
I think I've got a low attention threshold, so I like Julie. I need to have lots of things to be working across. And
Natasha, could you speak in your mic?
Sorry,
and
I'm
a little bit closer.
I've never been interested in directing. That's just one more set of pressures that I don't want.
I think it works better to have one creative view. I just finished co-directing a film, and I will never do that again.
Wow.
Yep.
Up front here, yeah.
So my question is about pitching, and if you have never officially pitched before and you're interested in talking to producers about it or just talking to people about your idea and about your film, it's that catch-22 thing. Like I think I know what it is. I think I've done it, but not being able to go see anything at the meat market or see a successful pitch or find out like what works and what doesn't, and what should I be saying, what should I not be saying, you know, the elevator pitch in business, all these things. And so I'd like to find out more about, what's the best way for me to kind of go about pitching an idea smartly, concisely.
Smart for like a couple people to volunteer to be filmed pitching. and then have that online with
Yeah,
the
that's a
festival,
great
with
idea.
these markets, because it really, it would be so helpful, and not just one, because you could get somebody that's just kind of brilliant and scary, and you'll feel like you'll
Right.
never be like that, but really to get like 2 or 3 people so that you can get the perspective of somebody who's more of a novice, who's doing it the first time, and someone who's very, very seasoned, and I think that's
Elizabeth
we should
Bradshaw,
suggest that.
what do you think of that idea? Do you think it's possible to do
Is
kind of
Elizabeth here?
an educational
Elizabeth
piece?
is in charge of the forum at Hot Docs.
Do you think you and Heather maybe could do an educational piece on pitching?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
For people who can't get into the forum or can't get into the meat market to
Yeah.
listen and observe? Yeah, to learn. Yeah.
It actually is one of the good, I mean, there's wonderful things about meat markets in terms of having the one-on-one contact and really being able to talk to projects. The really good thing about pitching, and the reason why I think, I don't know who it was, Natasha maybe, you said, go to ITFA, go to Hot Docs, going to these festivals, go as an observer to watch the pitching, because it is amazingly educational.
But you can't get into them. You can't get into them.
You can apply to be an observer.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the
Yeah.
big pitching forums.
I went to as an observer twice, and it was fantastic. You do learn a huge amount, and you know, like you're listening to people pitch and think, oh God, I wouldn't do that, or oh, that's brilliant, you know. So it's and you have all kinds of people, different ways of pitching, and you know, it's like, oh, that would work for me, and that, you know, so it's fantastic.
But it's a brilliant
opportunity to
idea,
do that.
and we'll do it at Women Make Movies, you know. We'll do some pitching in New York and film it and put it online, because I think it's really great.
But it's like those 2 things. You have these intimate, like IFP or here at the meat market, and so it's almost like learning 2 ways to pitch, because there you can't, you know, when you pitch it for Hot Docs, you have to be a little bit larger than life, because it's a whole room you're playing to. And if you and if you come off like that in a one-on-one, if you learn from that, and you come to a one-on-one meeting, people are going to be like, whoa, you know. So but it would be interesting to see both. Do you have it online at all? Oh, great.
You do? Great.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow, so it's there already.
Okay.
So
Did
for
you
those
hear
of you
that?
who didn't hear,
Hotdocs.ca.
you can go onto Hot Docs and you can actually watch the pitching from this year and from last year.
Amazing.
You have to what? Dig through. Great.
You'll tweet it? What's your Twitter handle?
What's your Twitter handle? Hot Docs
Forum Market?
Forum Markets. Okay. Great.
Thanks,
Or somebody
Elizabeth.
can, if somebody just tweets it to Chef Doc Fest, and we'll see it. Oh, that's great.
Say Twitter handle. That was amazing. That was really impressed.
I'll just make one comment about that it happened to me here, that somebody pitched to me and started reciting a pitch, the pitch that they probably had created for something like the forum, and I just zoned right out, you know. Nobody wants to be pitched at, really. They just want to be spoken to. It's really important. Okay, Jennifer, go.
You've all mentioned having legal concerns, and my question is basically a very simple one. At what point is it wisest to get a lawyer on board, and how do you establish a relationship with a lawyer who's going to be responsible to you and who knows all of the ins and outs and is extremely experienced with this kind of, with problems that may come up?
I've used the same lawyer probably for 5 or 6 projects. And he doesn't even live, I live in Sydney, he lives in Melbourne, but it doesn't really matter. And once you work with someone, they don't, you know, you have all the documents, the contracts, etc. You can work off for the next project, and it's cheaper and cheaper. You know, so I find that it's been really rewarding. And he, you know, like he's pretty accessible. You know, like I've worked with other lawyers that, you know, you have to wait and wait. But I just found this one, and I'm going to stick to him for as long as I can.
Yeah, I've got a great media lawyer as well, and I think the first project that we needed to sign an official contract with a broadcaster on, we got him on board. But you know, after a while, you can deal with your own broadcaster contracts because they're pretty standard terms. But it's just for things, you know, like my screw up with the sales agent on the feature film contract. You know, I signed it. I didn't run it past my lawyer, which I should have done because he would have probably spotted that. But yeah, I mean, an experienced media lawyer. Go for one.
Yeah, I mean, and also sometimes you need a lawyer to do the contracts, you're the producer to do the contracts with the director, and then you want production counsel for the production, especially if it's a film that might have legal issues. So it might not be the same person. A lot of times the directors have their own lawyers, and I think, you know, who they've worked with for a couple of projects and they want to stay with, and sometimes you wish they wouldn't. But it's ask people who their lawyers are and get recommendations and ask the questions to people who they like to work with. I mean, that's a really key relation. And my lawyer died. My lawyer died on a treadmill at 48, had a massive heart attack in December. And he was a friend, and I'd worked with him at Wellspring, Jeff Sanders. And yeah, and it was like after 15 years, I was like, well, what do you do? And I actually just took a while, and I couldn't think about it. And then when I did, I went and I really asked people who I respected, who did they think is really sharp? Who do they, because Jeff was kind of an amazing combination of a lot of different fields. So that, I think, it's a really important, it's a great question, and it's really important to find somebody who you can work with. If that's the right person, you've been working for how long, 12 years with the same lawyer? I mean, that's a key relationship, and they can save your ass.
But also, my lawyer will tell me about financing opportunities as well. He's at the Cannes Film Festival, he's talking to people out there. He'll tell me about where I can go to raise money, which is, amazing. And that advice is for free as well from him.
The other thing that I want to say about that is that, it's also important to have a lawyer that's experienced in the area that you're dealing with. I deal with attorneys all the time that know nothing about educational distribution, and it's really a waste of time, the filmmakers' money, because we have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. ITVS is a very difficult contract. There are lawyers that have done ITVS contracts that are very aware with what are the latest versions of the contract, what's recently changed.
And you know what, they might recommend to you when in this situation, that was one of the places where I said, okay, who do you recommend? And they gave me a list of lawyers who they have worked with, which, it's not their lawyer, but who filmmakers have worked with, who I guess they could stand, on the other side. So, and who they really rated highly. So it was incredibly helpful, and I think that's something that's really important. Like, if you're going to work with that kind of a very complicated contract and funder, you want somebody who has done that contract before, because you know what? They've pre-negotiated. You're already saving money.
Exactly.
Because they have pre-negotiated, especially that's like a government contract in a weird way. I mean, there's so much in there. And if they've gone through 12 of those, 35 steps, then that saves you a third of what you would be paying someone.
Yeah, absolutely. We have time for one last question. Right there.
I was just wondering about when is a good time to actually set up as a company. My director who I work with, she's been a sole trader and freelancer for 15 years, and I've now set up, I've recently sort of moved into production, and we're just wondering when is the good point to move on and become a limited company, or is it best to sort of carry on in a sort of cheaper, more straightforward, less legal situation? I don't know.
Well, I think
not illegal, but
it's when you get your commission. Do it then, because you need to be VAT registered, otherwise you're losing 20% of your budget.
My colleague is VAT registered
right,
already,
okay,
so...
but as a sole trader. You should really talk to an accountant, because it's about how you want to structure the setup of the company, whether you're shareholders, whether you pay yourself dividends. There are lots of different ways of being tax efficient. So I just talked to an accountant who had experience in that. But when there's a decent amount of money going through the company, that's when you should do it, I guess.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you wonderful, marvelous women. Thank you so much, Pat, Natasha, Julie, and Caroline.
Congratulations on 40 years.
Yeah. And I want to ask everybody to join us in the back for drinks and nibbles, celebrating Women Make Movies' 40th anniversary and Films Transit's International's 30th anniversary. And I just saw Diana Holtzberg walk in the room from Films Transit. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you, Debbie.